In this video, we are focusing on one of the most alarming and heartbreaking updates coming out of the ongoing regional conflict, where reports indicate that nearly 2,800 Israeli homes have been destroyed in a manner that many are comparing directly to the long-standing devastation seen in Palestine. The destruction is attributed to coordinated attacks carried out jointly by Egyptian and Iranian forces. And the scale of the incident has raised both humanitarian and geopolitical concerns. To break this down clearly, let's explore the different dimensions of what this really means, both for those on the ground and for the wider situation developing across the Middle East. When we talk about homes being destroyed, we're not just talking about physical structures made of concrete, glass, and steel. We're also talking about the memories, livelihoods, and identities that are embedded in those walls. Each house carried with it not only furniture and belongings, but also entire stories of families. Seeing 2,800 such homes reduced to rubble represents an enormous humanitarian challenge. In practical terms, this kind of damage leaves thousands of people suddenly homeless, struggling to find shelter, food, and medical care, while also dealing with the psychological trauma of displacement. The comparison to Palestine is not accidental, because it evokes decades of images of similar destruction, forced migrations, and the breaking apart of community structures. The scale of the destruction reveals the capability of the joint Egyptian and Iranian operation. For years, analysts speculated what it might look like if these two nations, who have historically had differing regional policies, coordinated militarily. Now we have a clear view of that potential. Egypt brings its geographic proximity, strategic military assets, and infrastructure knowledge. While Iran provides technological advancements in missiles, drones, and long-range strike systems. Together, they appear to have launched an offensive capable of overwhelming Israeli defenses in specific areas. The result was not just isolated strikes on military targets, but a concentrated campaign that spilled over into civilian residential areas, raising international alarms about proportionality, legality, and the ethics of warfare. Looking at the design elements of the attacks, much of the precision seems to have been oriented around key districts, striking not only housing units but also adjacent utilities. This has disrupted electricity grids, water supply systems, and public services, leaving communities paralyzed, even if their individual homes remain standing. The systematic approach of combining air-based assaults with targeted drone strikes showcases a performance level that speaks to advanced coordination. Unlike sporadic rocket fire that can sometimes be in, this joint operation demonstrated a sustained and layered attack strategy that managed to bypass much of Israel's Iron Dome system, a defense apparatus often lauded as nearly impenetrable. What makes this moment unique is not only the destruction itself, but the psychological impact it has on Israeli society. For years, many in Israel saw such devastation occurring across the border in Gaza or the West Bank, often framed as distant or unavoidable in the context of security operations. Now, experiencing similar levels of loss within their own communities changes the narrative. It introduces a new layer of vulnerability and forces a national reckoning with what it means to live in a region where no civilian area can be fully secured. The visual similarity of destroyed neighborhoods to the Rubble-filled streets of Palestinian cities will inevitably spark debates both internally and internationally about the cyclical nature of violence and retaliation. From a performance perspective, one could argue that the operation by Egypt and Iran was not only military, but symbolic. The sheer number of homes destroyed, 2,800, was likely chosen or highlighted to send a strong political message, signaling that the reach of these forces is not limited to border skirmishes or symbolic firepower. It's a demonstration of capability intended to reshape regional dynamics. To ordinary viewers, this number might just look like statistics, but in military analysis, it's a statement of both power and intent, marking a shift in how conflicts might be conducted in the coming years. The humanitarian toll is immense, and this is where international organizations are stepping in. Emergency shelters are being rushed to the affected areas. NGOs are calling for immediate ceasefires to allow aid distribution, and the United Nations is debating emergency resolutions. Families who once lived in middle-class, suburban-style neighborhoods are now crammed into makeshift shelters, schools, or temporary tents. Their children are out of school, their jobs are disrupted, and access to medical facilities is strained. This creates a cascading effect where an initial military strike leads to long-term societal breakdown, very similar to the conditions long documented in Palestine. What is also noteworthy is the speed with which information spread. Social media platforms are flooded with videos showing collapsed buildings, parents pulling children from rubble, and communities banding together in the aftermath. The visual design of these clips is raw and unfiltered, making them more impactful for audiences around the world. Unlike polished news reports, these first-hand recordings carry an authenticity that sparks outrage, sympathy, and at times polarized debates. This information war runs parallel to the physical one, influencing how international allies, neutral states, and even adversaries respond to Israel's defense systems, often celebrated as technologically advanced, faced their first real stress test in this coordinated attack. While the Iron Dome and other layered missile defense systems intercepted a percentage of the incoming projectiles, the sheer volume and timing of the strikes meant that gaps were exploited. This highlights a performance flaw that analysts have been warning about. No system is 100% foolproof, especially when faced with saturation-level assaults. The lessons drawn from this will not only impact Israel's military adjustments, but also influence defense, procurement, and strategic partnerships with the United States and Europe in terms of broader design. The attacks mirror the very kind of urban warfare that Israel itself has often been accused of conducting in Palestinian territories. The irony is hard to miss. Residential zones once considered safe havens became the front line, blurring the distinction between military and civilian spaces. This overlap is what makes modern conflicts so devastating, as homes, schools, and hospitals are caught in the crossfire. The destruction of 2,800 homes isn't just collateral, it becomes the central story. Reshaping how people perceive the legitimacy and morality of war tactics unique to this case is also the element of joint participation. Egypt's involvement signals a major departure from its decades-long peace treaty with Israel, a move that alters the entire Middle Eastern balance. Iran's role, long expected, underscores its commitment to supporting anti-Israel operations beyond rhetoric. The symbolic unity of an Arab-majority nation like Egypt aligning militarily with Iran, a non-Arab state but a key regional power, sets a precedent that could inspire other nations or groups to join such coordinated offensives. That alignment alone could be considered one of the most unique selling points of this development. Marking a new phase of multi-state conflict rather than isolated skirmishes, the ripple effect of losing 2,800 homes is not just immediate but generational. Families who have lost everything will struggle for years to rebuild. Insurance systems, government compensation programs, and international aid can only go so far. What cannot be restored is the sense of security and permanence for children growing up amidst this destruction. The psychological scars may parallel those of Palestinian youth who have lived under occupation and bombardment for decades. In this way, the comparison is not just rhetorical but deeply experiential economically. The losses are staggering. Thousands of homes destroyed translate into billions of dollars worth of property damage. Reconstruction will be slow, especially under the pressure of ongoing conflict. Local businesses that relied on these communities have collapsed, supply chains are disrupted, and national infrastructure bears the strain of emergency allocations. This adds another layer of crisis to Israel's economy, already stretched thin by defense spending and the global economic downturn on a strategic level. This event forces Israel into a difficult position. Retaliation is almost certain, but the scale and direction of that response will determine whether the conflict escalates into a broader regional war. At the same time, Israel must manage the internal crisis of providing for displaced citizens. Balancing military objectives with humanitarian obligations creates a strain on political leadership, testing not only government effectiveness, but also public confidence internationally. Reactions are divided. Some countries call for restraints and negotiations. Others emphasize Israel's right to defend itself, while still others highlight the parallels to Palestinian suffering and call for a re-evaluation of policies on both sides. The global conversation now has a new reference point. Not just Palestinian homes destroyed, but Israeli homes as well. This shift in narrative could influence how international law, media framing, and diplomatic negotiations evolve in the future. When you step back and look at the entire picture, the destruction of 2,800 800 Israeli homes due to joint Egyptian and Iranian attacks becomes more than just a single military incident. It becomes a case study in modern warfare, where civilian spaces are at the forefront, where alliances redefine the balance of power, and where the human cost overshadows any political or military gains. The technical precision of the strikes, the overwhelming volume of firepower, and the systemic impact on infrastructure reveal the capacity of coordinated regional actors to challenge even the most advanced defense systems. Yet at its heart, the story is not about missiles or strategy, but about families, children, and communities who find themselves waking up one morning to find their homes reduced to dust-smearing scenes they once thought could only happen elsewhere.